The amphitheater hung like a polished pearl in orbit around the binary star, its glassy walls reflecting the blazing twin suns. Rows upon rows of alien students sat in carefully tiered seats, appendages writhing nervously, eyes reflecting the infinite void outside. Every species present had evolved under precise, delicate conditions: gravity, atmospheric density, biochemical limits, the things they all thought immutable. Professor Thrin's voice cut through the silence, low but commanding, vibrating the very floor. No species, no intelligent species, can survive one standard gravity, 1G. It is the limit. A ripple of murmurs spread across the amphitheater. Tentacles recoiled, wings fluttered nervously. The professor's declaration was not new. It had been taught, recited, and memorized for millennia. Yet hearing it spoken aloud, accompanied by the holographic images of collapsing skeletons and ruptured hearts, the weight of inevitability pressed down on them all. Bones would fail, muscles would tear, hearts would burst. Intelligence could not endure such forces. Then came the projection. The auditorium dimmed, and a blue and green sphere materialized above the central platform, rotating lazily in simulated orbit. "Earth," Thrin said, his antennae trembling slightly. A collective gasp, if such a sound could be called that in the alien chorus, passed through the amphitheater. The data streams beside the globe confirmed it. Atmospheric pressure, gravity, rotation, all incompatible with any known intelligent evolution. Primitive life, perhaps, but cities, spacecraft, civilization, impossible. "Some anomaly in the scans," Thrin muttered, fingers tracing streams of glowing data in the air, or misreadings. But the evidence persisted. Historical logs, intercepted communications, orbital surveys. Earth was not only alive, it was thriving. Vast cities gleamed in continents' curves. Spacefaring vessels orbited a small, seemingly insignificant moon. Machines, networks, intelligence, all thriving under forces calculated to crush the very idea of life. A shadow passed over the entrance doors. Every alien head turned. In a subtle ripple of unease, Thrin stiffened. The doors opened, sliding silently on magnetic tracks. A lone figure entered. It was small, frail-looking, limbs delicate, posture upright but unremarkable. No protective exoskeleton, no extra musculature, no environmental adaptations beyond what a biologist would deem insufficient. It moved with a strange, human grace, calm, deliberate, almost defiant. Whispers spread across the amphitheater like electric sparks. Tentacles twitched, eyes dilated. The impossible had walked into their midst. Professor Thrin raised a hand, voice sharp. The creature's lips, humans had lips, a curious inefficiency, twitched into a smile. Silence, absolute, the kind that presses against your sensory organs until you can feel the empty weight of space itself. Every student froze. Every sensor reading went haywire, as though the galaxy itself paused to witness this anomaly. Thrin's voice, now a mixture of awe and disbelief, barely escaped his mandibles. "But that's impossible." The human tilted its head, observing the auditorium full of beings who had never known fear like this. And in that moment, the truth slammed into every alien mind present. The universe had miscalculated. What they had been taught as absolute, the limits of life, the inviolable rules of biology, was wrong. The amphitheater seemed smaller, the stars outside more distant, as if reality itself had contracted under the weight of this revelation. Eyes darted nervously between the human and the floating globe above. How could this fragile creature endure the crushing forces that would shatter every other intelligent form known to the galaxy? Even the professor's normally unshakable composure wavered. He adjusted his data arrays, double-checking readings, expecting instruments to betray him. Nothing. Every scan, every sensor confirmed the impossible. The human was alive, fully intact, entirely unharmed. The human's calm presence radiated an understated audacity. The auditorium waited, breathless, or whatever alien equivalents filled that vacuum. One question loomed, unspoken yet screaming in every mind present. How? The professor swallowed, antennae twitching. "Then tell me," he said. His voice was barely more than a whisper, yet it carried the weight of millennia of certainty. A soundless quake ran through the audience. Every alien mind registered it. Earth, the impossible planet. And now here it stood, alive, embodied, defying every law they had known.
The lecture had begun as a routine affirmation of galactic knowledge. It would end as the beginning of something far greater and far more terrifying. And somewhere deep in the metallic walls, the Academy itself seemed to hum in anticipation of the question that would follow. If 1G was lethal, then how was this human still standing? The lecture hall had barely recovered from the shock of the human's arrival when Professor Thrin's expression hardened. Curiosity warred with disbelief in his multifaceted eyes. "No," he whispered to himself, a hiss like wind across titanium plates. "This cannot be. Measurements must be faulty, instruments misaligned." He motioned to a metallic platform at the center of the amphitheater, a sleek, angular device humming with barely contained energy, the gravity chamber. It was the Academy's ultimate teaching tool, a device used sparingly, always with caution. It could crush bones, collapse hearts, tear muscle fibers, and induce unconsciousness in mere seconds. It existed to prove limits. Today, it would do so again. "Observe," Thrin commanded, voice reverberating unnaturally in the amphitheater. The alien students leaned forward, appendages trembling. Wings trembled nervously. Eye stalks quivered nervously. Data arrays flickered nervously in anticipation.
1G in controlled simulations. Most could not survive even that for more than minutes. The chamber's controls glowed, and a low hum resonated through the hall. The professor tapped a sequence into the interface. A fine grid of energy lines stretched across the chamber floor as the force slowly ramped up. 2G. Several species faltered immediately, legs collapsing beneath them. Their bodies shook violently. Nervous tendrils lashed out for support. Small drones hovered, ready to intervene. 3G. The first screams of pain, low-frequency groans, mechanical whirs from emergency drones. Students collapsed like fragile statues of salt. Eyes widened in terror. This was the power the professor had spoken of, life itself bending and breaking beneath forces it could not endure. 4G. The chamber floor pressed down like a silent executioner. Drones buzzed, lifting bodies before organs could rupture. The amphitheater itself vibrated with the tension. "At this level," Thrin intoned, voice tight, "any advanced species would die within moments, even the hardiest." And yet, he hesitated, antennae twitching. The human, calm as if standing in a soft spring breeze rather than a high-tech execution chamber, stepped forward. No hesitation, no fear, just measured steps, the sound of soft soles clicking against reinforced metal. "Step inside," Thrin commanded. The word was heavy, almost a challenge, but the human obeyed with a serenity that unnerved every witness. 5G. The floor vibrated under immense force. Students struggled to remain upright. Several tried to flee or grab supports, but were immobilized by instinctive fear. The human, in contrast, took a slow breath, arms lifting casually to stretch, like awakening from a long nap. 6G. Muscles of every alien in the room screamed against the artificial force. Heartbeats raced beyond natural limits. The human's body, however, remained unbroken, fluid in motion, balancing as if gravity were a suggestion, not a punishment. 7G. Panic rippled through the amphitheater. Appendages clutched at rails. Eye stalks extended fully. Wings shuddered violently. Sensors recorded impossible readings. Energy expenditure, bone density, muscle strain. None of it matching the human's calm demeanor. Thrin's mandibles moved, almost in disbelief. "Impossible. It cannot be. The data." His voice faltered. Instruments blinked, recalibrating, scanning, adjusting. Nothing. Every sensor confirmed the impossible. The human remained unharmed. 8G. 9G. Students began to fall into unconsciousness. Drones activated automatically, lifting and stabilizing them, but none were required for the human. Each increment, each surge of pressure that would have pulverized another species, passed without consequence. 0G. The professor reached for the emergency shutdown lever, heart racing, antennae rigid. He expected collapse. He expected failure. He expected at least a twitch, a sign of struggle, but there was none. The human stood straight, shoulders relaxed, eyes calmly scanning the observers. Not barely surviving, not trembling, not defiant in a strained way. Simply standing, comfortably, effortlessly. A hush fell over the chamber, denser than vacuum, heavier than gravity itself. Every alien present, even those still conscious, felt the weight of a universe overturned. The rules they had learned, revered, taught as absolute, were being rewritten in real time. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into stunned gasps. Instruments displayed readings that defied logic. Bones flexing, muscles operating, hearts pumping, all perfectly within human norms. Every recording and data feed agreed. This human should not exist. Then, the calmest sound of all, a soft tilt of the human's head. Lips, curious, fragile, unarmored, curved into a smile. Eyes, reflecting the harsh chamber light, scanned the room. The question hung in the air, echoing in alien minds long after it was spoken. Every measurement, every assumption, every rule of biology seemed to shiver in recognition of its inadequacy. The amphitheater held its collective breath. The universe had paused, waiting for an answer that would not come. The human's gaze remained steady, serene, almost challenging. The gravity chamber continued to hum, now irrelevant, a silent witness to the awakening of an unimagined possibility that everything the galaxy knew about life, strength, and survival might be wrong. And in that silent tension, a single, horrifying truth rippled through every alien observer. Humanity was not just surviving. Humanity was rewriting reality. For days, perhaps weeks, the professor retreated into his private laboratories, rooms filled with flickering holoscreens, anti-gravity data nodes, and the quiet hum of analytical engines. The amphitheater and its students became a distant memory as he devoted himself entirely to Earth. Every intercepted transmission, every orbital scan, every fragment of planetary history flowed into his consciousness like an endless tide of forbidden knowledge. And the more he learned, the colder his multi-layered exoskeleton felt. The galaxy had known of Earth, yes, but it had always been dismissed as a fragile, barely habitable rock. Life there might emerge perhaps in scattered microbial forms. Yet intelligent life? Civilization? No, it was impossible. Gravity alone should have crushed the potential of any sentient species. And yet, here it was. The data was horrifying. Earth did not merely exceed gravity norms, it defied every principle of habitability ever cataloged. Violent storms tore across continents, the winds strong enough to strip bark from trees and topple stone pillars. Predators lurked everywhere, from the tiniest toxin-bearing insects to enormous apex hunters, each evolutionarily engineered to consume anything smaller and weaker.
Temperature swings ranged from frozen nights where extremities shattered to scorching days that liquefied asphalt and baked deserts into glass. Deadly microbes thrived in soil, water, and air, evolving faster than most sentient species could even respond. Tectonic plates shifted unpredictably, toppling mountains, swallowing cities, and releasing fire from the planet's molten veins. And yet, humans had evolved, not just survived, but thrived. Cities sprawled across continents, machines and networks hummed with life. History was recorded, civilization built, entire species of humans persisted despite the constant threat of death. The professor watched footage with trembling mandibles. Human history unfolded like a montage of impossibility. He saw them wade into wars that should have annihilated their species. They climbed mountains where oxygen approached null levels, muscles screaming for air, hearts racing beyond any natural limit. They dived into ocean depths where pressure should have crushed every bone in their bodies, emerging alive, shivering, and unbroken. He examined their injuries. Broken limbs healed quickly, burns sealed, tissues regenerated. Pain did not stop them. Hunger did not stop them. Cold, heat, disease, predators, none could halt their progress. It was as though their very physiology had been forged under the hammer of relentless adversity. But the most unsettling discoveries were not physical. Humans did not merely endure danger, they sought it, they constructed it for themselves. Explorers ascended mountains for the thrill of risk. Athletes competed in contests that tore muscles and broke bones. Scientists dived into unknown oceans, jungles, and deserts where every step could be fatal. Curiosity was a weapon of survival, wielded with deliberate intent. The professor watched a human stand atop a mountain ridge, oxygen thin, wind tearing at their face, and smile. He saw humans hurl themselves into violent storms, into freezing rivers, into infernos of nature's wrath, and emerge triumphant. They were not content with mere survival. They were addicted to the challenge itself. A shiver ran through Thrin's antennae. Gravity had been only the first deception. The humans' bodies were extreme, yes, but their minds were unbounded by fear in ways that alien logic could scarcely grasp. Calculations of survival, evolution, risk, and probability were rendered meaningless. For these creatures, danger was not a deterrent, it was a stimulus. He scrolled through ancient archives, war chronicles, and genetic studies. Every human adaptation, every evolutionary quirk, every societal construct pointed to the same conclusion.
Earth had not been merely a cradle of life, it had been a forge. Each environmental catastrophe, each predator encounter, each sudden shift in temperature or seismic upheaval had hammered and tempered humanity like molten metal. The professor's exoskeleton trembled, not with cold, but with the dawning horror of understanding.
This species was not merely surviving Earth. Earth had built them. Every challenge the planet presented, every near-death event, every catastrophic failure of biology had been absorbed, endured, and transformed into strength. His view of the galaxy shifted as he scrolled further. He considered the countless planets labeled as habitables, carefully selected for their safety, predictability, and low-risk evolution. These worlds produced species efficient, cautious, and fragile. By every measure, they should have dominated the galaxy. Yet here was Earth, an infernal, chaotic world that should have produced nothing more than microbial life, and it had produced humans. And humans were dangerous not only in their bodies, but in their will. They did not merely adapt, they innovated, they fought, they explored, they challenged physics, biology, and probability itself. They refused to yield. Thryn leaned back, mandibles clacking softly in contemplation. He shook his head. No, that phrase had been proven false. Every principle of survival, every accepted limit of intelligence and endurance had been shattered by a single, fragile-looking creature. Gravity was only the beginning. Deathworlds, cataclysm, predators, disease, fire, ice, poison, and famine. None had conquered humanity. Humanity had conquered them. And more than that, they had learned to thrive under them, to seek them out, to extract power from adversity itself. The professor realized the full horror of it. If humans could survive 1G, endure catastrophe, and emerge stronger, what else could they do? How far beyond the limits of other species could they extend their power, intellect, and will? Every image, every archive, every test made one conclusion inevitable. The galaxy had not been wrong to fear evolution. It had been wrong to assume it could define limits. These humans were something else entirely. And in that dawning realization, Thryn understood the most chilling truth of all. Humans were not merely inhabitants of Earth. They were its ultimate creation, forged in fire, water, ice, and wind, tempered by predators, disease, and calamity. Humans did not survive the planet. They had been forged by it. And if the galaxy ever underestimated them, the consequences would be catastrophic. The lab hummed quietly. Screens displayed endless loops of human achievement and endurance. The professor's mind raced. The calm, almost casual defiance of that small human in the amphitheater was no anomaly. It was the product of millennia of planetary extremity. Earth was no ordinary planet. It was a forge, and its children were weapons disguised as fragile creatures. The reverberations of the gravity chamber test spread through the Galactic Academy faster than any transmission had a right to. The corridors, once orderly and hushed, now thrummed with nervous energy.
Data nodes blared, holographic displays flickered, and the normally disciplined students swarmed laboratories like swarming fireflies, all whispering in tongues too varied for any single creature to comprehend. Professor Thryn, normally the arbiter of calm logic, felt his antennae quiver as the reports poured in. Students, armed with curiosity and unrestrained disbelief, requested repeated demonstrations, each more elaborate than the last. Nearby research stations dispatched specialists, alien physiologists, biologists, and xenopsychologists who arrived in sleek ships bristling with instruments designed to probe every fiber, tendon, and synapse of the human body. And the human, calm, composed, almost serene, submitted to every test without hesitation. Endurance tests stretched the limits of reason. Long hours under fluctuating gravity, exposure to sub-zero temperatures, sudden bursts of acceleration. Human muscles flexed and relaxed, heartbeats accelerating and decelerating with an unnatural harmony. Bones, measured with the most sensitive instruments, showed densities that should have been impossible. Pain tolerance trials induced controlled discomfort. Pressure sensors, chemical stimulants, electrical impulses, each designed to overwhelm, each carefully recorded. The human flinched occasionally, but the body continued to perform as if discomfort were merely another data point, another obstacle to adjust to, rather than a threat to survival. Strength evaluations followed, 3G, each increment intended to shatter all expectations. Alien researchers held their breath, appendages tense, wings trembling, eye stalks extended in disbelief. At every step, the human performed beyond the maximums predicted by galactic biology. Finally, the moment came, 5G.
Even Thrine, who had now begun to question the very foundations of life sciences, prepared for failure. Emergency drones hovered, sensors monitored every vital sign, and the amphitheater's floor hummed with barely restrained energy. In theory, even a single heartbeat under this gravity should trigger catastrophic failure. The human entered the chamber, movements deliberate, steady, confident. The room seemed to shrink, every alien eye focused, every sensor straining. The gravity rose. Bones, hearts, muscles, each should have screamed in protest. And yet the human simply adjusted, a subtle shift in stance, a small stretch of arms, as if greeting an old friend. 5G. The chamber shook, sensors flickered, some even overloaded as readings climbed beyond known biological maximums. Students recoiled. Wings beat nervously, tentacles grasped at walls. Every system designed to measure limits failed to capture the human's capabilities. The professor's mandibles clicked in disbelief. He rechecked the calibration of every instrument. Nothing was wrong. The numbers were correct. The human, by every metric, was functioning perfectly.
Every rule, every formula, every assumption built over centuries of xenobiological study collapsed like sand beneath the tide. A low hum of realization began to rise through the assembled alien minds. If humans could endure gravity that immobilized or killed every other known intelligent species, then in environments of lower gravity, planets where wings and musculature could operate unhindered, they would be unstoppable. The implications expanded like a supernova in the professor's mind. Armies of humans deployed in lighter worlds could outmaneuver, outperform, and overwhelm entire civilizations. Their density of muscle and bone alone made them living fortresses. Their cardiovascular resilience allowed extreme exertion without collapse. Their nervous systems coordinated actions with an efficiency that seemed almost inhuman. And yet, humanity had not invaded. They had not dominated. The professor reviewed ancient archives, dusty and fragmented, finding quiet warnings written in the margins of historical analyses, notes about human tenacity, unexplained survivals, feats that seemed mythic even to advanced civilizations. Now he understood. These warnings had been ignored, dismissed as anomalies. But they were not anomalies. They were the quiet echo of truth. Humanity was not fragile. Humanity was overbuilt, over-engineered, and optimized in ways no other species had even conceived. The humans' calm, almost casual demeanor only deepened the horror. In the chamber, standing comfortably under conditions designed to destroy them, they embodied a species that had been forged for extremes, and extremes had been the only measure the galaxy had ever feared. Students and researchers began sharing data frantically. Tentacles gestured toward graphs that no one believed possible. Eyes expanded as simulations ran, projecting human capabilities across thousands of planetary conditions. The results were terrifying. Any civilization encountering humans without extreme caution could be annihilated before even recognizing the threat. Yet, even amidst the fear and awe, a strange pattern emerged. Humans had not weaponized this power, at least not openly. Every test, every display of strength revealed mastery without aggression. Every survival, every endurance feat was accompanied by calm, even detached observation. They were both dangerous and inexplicably restrained. Thren's thoughts turned dark. Could this restraint continue indefinitely? Could a species so perfectly engineered to survive, so dangerously capable in every measurable way, ever be provoked into using its full potential? He glanced at the human, standing like a monument to defiance and possibility. Calm, serene, unbroken, completely aware of the magnitude of what they represented. And then it struck him, the quiet, unspoken terror that had been growing since the first gravity test. The galaxy had misjudged the rules. It had assumed fragility where none existed, limitation where none applied. Every measure, every standard, every calculation was meaningless in the face of humans, and the implications were far from abstract. Humans could survive, endure, and excel in any environment. In lighter worlds where alien species thrived but assumed superiority, humans would dominate naturally, physically, and psychologically. In heavier worlds, they adapted effortlessly. In war, in exploration, in disaster, they would survive where others perished. The Academy's corridors buzzed with nervous whispers. Researchers recorded, recalculated, and recalibrated, but the conclusion was unanimous. Humans were not only exceptional, they were terrifyingly so. 5G, and excel beyond every known biological limit, what would stop them in the rest of the galaxy? By the time the rumors left the Academy, the galaxy was already trembling. Data streams from orbital arrays, interstellar transmissions, and academic nodes carried the whispers from planet to planet. They survive. They endure. No one had yet seen the human firsthand, but the implications alone spread faster than solar flares, igniting fear, awe, and an almost tangible dread across star systems. Military observers arrived first, their vessels sleek, bristling with sensors and weaponry. Strategists followed, holographic maps and battle simulations illuminating the interior of their command decks. Every calculation, every metric, every historical comparison converged on a single chilling reality. A species evolved under 1G gravity could dominate almost any environment they encountered. The analysts' screens showed what alien species had assumed impossible. Humans could carry loads that would cripple or kill most sentients. Their musculature was efficient, explosive, and endlessly adaptable. Their skeletal density was such that bones acted as armor against impacts that would shatter even the most advanced exoskeletons. Wounds healed rapidly. Heart and lung efficiency allowed endurance in conditions that would cripple others in moments. Every physiological system surpassed prior maxima. And yet, the most unsettling attribute was not physical, it was psychological. Humans displayed a stubbornness, a curiosity, and almost pathological refusal to surrender that confounded logic. Historical archives documented humans persisting long after every rational calculation deemed them doomed. They continued to fight in hopeless wars, explore regions declared lethal, labor under conditions that should have killed them. Alien strategists, once confident in their supremacy, now recalculated every scenario. Simulations ran on planets of lower gravity, where most species could move swiftly, manipulate heavy tools, or coordinate in battle. Humans, the models predicted, would dominate these environments effortlessly. Fleets on orbital defense grids would be outmaneuvered, armies on the ground would be outpaced and outpowered.
Command centers thought secure would fall under strategies impossible for any other species to conceive. Yet even in the face of this raw power, humanity had not invaded. There were no fleets crossing borders in conquest, no empires established on distant moons, no wars begun to assert dominance. Instead, humans explored, they built, they cooperated. Their expansion was deliberate but measured, scientific and creative. They were everywhere, yet in every encounter they chose not to annihilate. The professor watched simulations unfold in his private chamber, his exoskeleton trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer incomprehensibility of it. "It is not strength alone," he whispered to himself. He scrolled through centuries of human history, noting every survival against insurmountable odds, every constructive act, every effort to improve, collaborate, or innovate. Humans did not merely endure, they created, and they persisted without domination. Calculations of combat scenarios painted a terrifying but incomplete picture. A single human unit could neutralize entire regiments in low-gravity worlds, yet humans often engaged in diplomacy, cooperation, and knowledge-sharing instead of conquest. A fleet of humans could outmaneuver alien vessels built for centuries of warfare, but their navigational logs showed exploration missions, scientific research, and trade initiatives rather than invasion. The professor's multifaceted eyes lingered on the screens. Every analysis raised the same question: why? Why would a species capable of overwhelming power choose to act with restraint? Why would creatures designed to survive, to dominate, to thrive under conditions that would destroy all others, engage in construction and exploration rather than conquest? Whispers among the academicians suggested fear. Some advocated for containment strategies, defensive research, or even preemptive action. Others advocated caution, recommending that humanity be observed and studied rather than confronted. All agreed, however, that the galaxy had misjudged humans. It had assumed fragility where none existed, limits where there were none, and compliance where there was defiance. Thrin's mind turned to a broader reflection. Perhaps the lesson was not about physics, biology, or combat. Perhaps the galaxy had misinterpreted the meaning of survival itself. Humans did not merely overcome challenges, they transformed them into opportunities. They did not seek to dominate through fear or force, they sought to shape, improve, and understand. Their power was a latent force, untapped in aggression but omnipresent in capability. The professor realized the paradox, and it chilled him. In every measure, humans were supremely dangerous. In every observation, humans could annihilate, yet they chose not to. Their restraint, their ethics, their curiosity, all combined to make them unpredictable, unstoppable, and impossible to control.
A quiet hum ran through the observation deck as simulations ran endlessly. Strategists paused, analysts scribbled corrections, and military drones hovered with inactive weaponry. All recognized the terrifying truth. This was not a species merely surviving. This was a species rewriting the rules of engagement, the limits of endurance, and the assumptions of civilization itself. And then, the realization hit Thrin fully, like a star collapsing into singularity. Perhaps the galaxy had been looking at the wrong question all along. It was not how strong humans were that mattered. It was why they chose not to dominate. The thought lingered in every mind that had watched the simulations. The galaxy had prepared for brute force, technological supremacy, and conquest, yet humans, capable of all of it and more, operated by a code alien to every known civilization. Their restraint was more powerful than any weapon, more terrifying than any fleet. The professor leaned back, antennae curling nervously. Every simulation, every data point, every historical record converged on the same unsettling conclusion. Humans were the ultimate enigma, a species capable of dominating all, yet unwilling to do so. A species that had survived and thrived on a planet that should have destroyed it, that could outfight, outbuild, and outthink any opponent, yet chose cooperation over conquest. And somewhere beyond the stars, humans continued to explore, to learn, to live, unbound by fear, untroubled by limitations, and entirely indifferent to the galaxy's assumptions. The hum of data, the quiet of contemplation, and the dread of possibility filled the chamber. For the first time in history, aliens did not fear only human strength. They feared the mystery behind it. What would happen if someday humans stopped choosing restraint? And the galaxy shivered at the thought. This section ends on a tense, reflective cliffhanger, perfectly setting up Section 6, the human explanation, where the professor finally confronts the human mind and learns why humanity behaves this way. Do you want me to proceed with that now? The laboratory was quiet, almost oppressively so, as the last of the students and visiting researchers departed. Gravity chambers powered down, data arrays hummed softly, and the hum of distant engines reminded the professor that the galaxy continued to turn, oblivious to the revelations unfolding here. Professor Thrin, exhausted and tense, finally found himself alone with the human. Weeks of testing, observation, and simulation had culminated in this moment. The amphitheater, the academy, the galaxy's assumptions, all faded into the background. Only the human remained, seated calmly on a reinforced bench, watching him with a curious, almost amused expression. The professor's antennae twitched, mandibles clicking in nervous hesitation.
He had asked countless questions, probed every physical limit, analyzed every data point, and yet the fundamental mystery remained unsolved. The human's lips curved into a laugh, soft, warm, and oddly infectious. It was a sound the professor had never heard in any species before. Joy interwoven with defiance, curiosity, and something deeper, something almost like understanding the absurdity of life itself. Because Earth tried to kill us every day, the human replied, almost casually. The simplicity of the answer stunned the professor. He blinked, antennae trembling. The words seemed to hang in the air, charged with implications far beyond physical survival. "Explain," he managed. The human leaned back, fingers lacing behind their head, eyes reflecting both the fluorescent lights and some inner clarity the professor could not comprehend. We never had the luxury of safety. Every day was a challenge. Climate shifts could freeze or burn. Predators lurked in every shadow. Disease, famine, natural disasters, they weren't exceptions. "Exactly," the human said. "We didn't just survive. We had to adapt, constantly. Every threat demanded more endurance, more strength, more ingenuity. Power wasn't a choice. It was a requirement." The professor's multifaceted eyes followed the human's gestures, tracing the careful, deliberate motions, noting the fluid efficiency of movement, the calm certainty in posture. This creature embodied every paradox he had uncovered. He asked cautiously. The human smiled,
tilting their heads slightly. Even more so, the planet doesn't just break us, it teaches us. Challenges aren't obstacles, they're puzzles. Problems exist to be solved. Danger isn't a warning, it's an invitation. Impossibility isn't a rule. Thrin's mandibles clicked softly. He reviewed centuries of galactic philosophy, evolutionary theory, and behavioral studies. Every principle he had known, every axiom upon which civilization had based its predictions about intelligence, adaptation, and survival, now seemed incomplete, almost naive. Humans had transcended them all. The professor asked, voice barely above a whisper. The human leaned forward, eyes bright and unflinching. We don't just refuse limits, we ignore them. We push past them because the universe isn't obligated to be convenient. You think survival is optional. It isn't. Every day on Earth demanded more. Every day forced us to grow stronger, faster, smarter, tougher. The planet didn't care if we liked it or not. The professor shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of understanding. Humans did not seek power for ambition. They sought survival. Every skill, every adaptation, every feat of strength or endurance had been earned through necessity, honed under pressure so extreme that the galaxy had no frame of reference. The human's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. We didn't need to. We don't measure ourselves by domination. Earth taught us to overcome, not to destroy.
The galaxy isn't a threat, it's a challenge. A long silence followed. The professor's mind raced, grappling with the implications. Every calculation he had made about human capabilities, every simulation of war, endurance, or exploration, now had a new context. The greatest power of humanity was not the density of their bones, the strength of their muscles, or the resilience of their hearts. It was something more fundamental, more profound. You survive because you must, he said slowly, almost to himself. Yes, the human confirmed. But more than that, we thrive because we choose to. We see every impossibility as a problem to solve, every limit as a question to challenge. Survival was never optional. The professor exhaled, feeling the enormity of the truth press against him like gravity multiplied tenfold. Humanity's strength was not a tool to conquer, but a reflection of their planet's relentless forging. Their minds, shaped by constant adversity, approached the universe not with fear, but with curiosity, determination, and a refusal to yield. And in that quiet laboratory, surrounded by dormant instruments and flickering holoscreens, the professor understood the final, terrifying lesson. The galaxy had never faced a species merely built to survive. It had encountered a species that refused to acknowledge limits. And limits, the professor realized, were meaningless in the presence of such resolve. This section concludes with a powerful revelation and emotional climax, showing that humanity's true strength is psychological as well as physical. Next, we can continue with Section 7, Humanity's Choice, the final section, to close the story with the motivational and awe-inspiring ending. Do you want me to proceed with that now? The Galactic Council Chamber had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. It had heard declarations of war, treaties of peace, and the quiet extinction notices of species that had failed to adapt. Yet never, across the thousands of cycles recorded in its crystalline memory, had it hosted a gathering like this. Representatives from dozens of star systems floated within the vast spherical hall, some perched on anti-gravity platforms, others rested within environmental pods suited to their biology. Wings folded, tendrils curled, eyes, hundreds of them, focused toward the center. Professor Thrin stood alone on the central dais. Above him, a massive holographic display shimmered into life, projecting a rotating image of a small blue planet. Earth. The murmurs began immediately. For decades, Earth had existed in the margins of galactic records, a curiosity at best, a warning at worst, a high-gravity anomaly where primitive life might struggle briefly before extinction. It had never been considered a candidate for advanced civilization. Yet now the council chamber was filled because of it. Thrin allowed the silence to stretch before speaking. A new projection appeared. Graphs, biological models, evolutionary curves.
We believed intelligence required stability, low gravity, predictable climates. Heads nodded. This had been the cornerstone of galactic xenobiology. Thryn paused. The chamber erupted in whispers. A towering amphibious delegate shifted uneasily within its water sphere. A crystalline entity emitted flickers of bright alarm. Even the ancient observers, those who rarely reacted to anything, turned their attention sharply toward the professor. Thryn gestured toward Earth. This planet possesses gravity levels exceeding what our models define as survivable for intelligent life. It suffers violent weather cycles. Its surface hosts aggressive predators. Its atmosphere contains lethal microbes. The hologram shifted, displaying storms, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Deathworlds were places civilizations avoided, planets considered evolutionary dead ends, where survival itself was a daily battle. Yet the hologram changed again. Now it showed cities glowing at night, orbital satellites circling the planet, human explorers walking across alien landscapes. Silence fell again, heavier this time. The professor continued. Our previous assumption was that such environments prevented intelligence from evolving. He allowed the statement to settle. Extreme environments do not prevent evolution. Another wave of murmurs passed through the council. Thryn expanded the display, showing human physiology data collected during the Academy experiments. Humans possess unusually dense skeletal structures. Their musculature produces exceptional power relative to body mass. More graphs appeared. In addition, they demonstrate remarkable psychological resilience. The council members shifted uneasily. A strategist from the Outer Defense Coalition leaned forward. Thryn met the gaze calmly. He enlarged the holographic image of Earth until it filled the chamber like a second sun. He paused. A long, uneasy silence followed. For centuries, galactic civilization had avoided Deathworlds. They were considered evolutionary failures, places where life struggled rather than thrived. Now Thryn was suggesting something far more unsettling, that perhaps those worlds were not failures at all. A crystalline counselor flickered brightly. The room shifted with uneasy realization. Earth was no longer merely an anomaly. It had become proof that life could evolve far beyond the limits the galaxy had assumed. Thryn lowered his gaze briefly before activating one final display. The chamber darkened. The projection shifted. Now the image showed the Academy gravity chamber. Alien observers stood around the containment field, their expressions frozen between fear and disbelief. At the center of the chamber stood the human. Gravity indicators climbed steadily across the screen. 5G, 7G, 9G. Many of the council members leaned forward. They had seen the reports, but seeing it was different. 0G. The human remained standing.
Not struggling, not collapsing, standing comfortably. In the recording, the professor's voice could be heard ordering an emergency shutdown. And then the human spoke. The words echoed clearly through the council chamber. The recording ended. No one spoke. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the council had no immediate response. Because the question did not only challenge biological theory, it challenged the very assumptions that had guided civilization for thousands of years. Finally, one of the oldest council members spoke, a being whose species had existed since before the earliest star maps were drawn. Thryn inclined his head. The chamber filled with quiet murmurs as scientists, philosophers, and strategists began speaking with one another. Entire research initiatives were already forming. Exploration programs were being proposed. And somewhere among those discussions was a growing realization that the galaxy had been thinking too cautiously for too long. Earth, once dismissed as an evolutionary mistake, was now something entirely different. A symbol. A demonstration of resilience. Proof that intelligence could emerge from chaos rather than comfort. As the council session ended, Thryn looked one last time at the frozen image of the human standing beneath impossible gravity. A simple question had shattered centuries of certainty. And now, across the galaxy, scientists were beginning to ask a far more dangerous one. If humanity had already disproven the limits of biology, what other impossible things might they prove wrong next? Years passed. Stars shifted in the night skies of distant worlds, empires rose and recalculated their strategies, and countless scientific papers rewrote the laws that had once seemed unbreakable. But in the quiet orbit of the Galactic Academy of Advanced Xenobiology,
The amphitheater remained unchanged. Its curved walls still reflected the distant glow of twin suns. Rows of seats still climbed upward in perfect arcs, waiting to hold the minds that would shape the next generation of galactic understanding. Professor Thryn stood once again at the center platform. The amphitheater was full. Dozens of species had gathered, some familiar, some newly admitted to the Academy since the revelations years earlier. Winged scholars perched along the upper tiers, amphibious thinkers floated within spherical containment pods, crystalline entities refracted the chamber lights into soft prismatic glows. All eyes focused on the professor. A new lecture cycle had begun. For centuries, the first lesson of this course had always been the same. Gravity determines the limits of life. That lesson no longer existed. Thryn glanced briefly at the central console before speaking. "Welcome," he began, his voice calm and steady. A holographic star map appeared above the platform, slowly rotating.
Worlds of every size and environment drifted through the projection. Lush green planets, frozen spheres, storm-racked moons, and distant red deserts. Graphs appeared beside the star map. Gravity thresholds, atmospheric tolerances, temperature ranges, biological endurance limits. These models were considered absolute, he said quietly. The projection paused. One small blue planet drifted into the center of the display. Earth. The students leaned forward instinctively. Even now, years after the original discovery, Benaim carried a strange gravity of its own. Thryn studied their reactions. Curiosity, confusion, anticipation. He remembered the first time he had stood in this room and repeated the old lecture, when he himself had believed those limits were unquestionable truths. But the galaxy had changed since then, and so had he. The amphitheater grew quiet. The projection shifted. The star map disappeared, replaced by a simple phrase glowing in the air: "Never assume the limits of life." Several students exchanged uncertain glances. Thryn allowed the silence to deepen before speaking again. He activated the archive. The amphitheater lights dimmed. The recording flickered to life. It showed the amphitheater gravity chamber as it had appeared years earlier, sterile, metallic, humming softly with restrained power. Students in the amphitheater leaned forward. They had studied the reports, but few had ever seen the original recording. The gravity indicator appeared on the screen. 4G. Alien observers in the chamber struggled to stand. 6G. Several collapsed. Emergency drones floated nearby. 8G. The atmosphere in the recording became tense, fearful. And at the center of the chamber stood the human, small, fragile-looking, almost unimpressive compared to the towering alien researchers around them. Yet as the gravity climbed, the human did not collapse, did not tremble, did not fall. 0G. The students in the amphitheater held their breath. Even knowing the outcome, the moment carried a quiet, impossible tension. The humans stretched their arms casually, as if waking from a nap. A murmur rippled through the audience. Thryn watched them carefully. He had seen that same reaction countless times. Shock, disbelief, the slow collapse of certainty. Then the recording reached its final moment. The human tilted their head slightly and looked at the stunned observers surrounding the chamber, and they asked the question that had changed everything. The recording ended. Silence filled the amphitheater. The students remained still, absorbing the moment. Thryn stepped forward. He gestured toward the empty projection space. His antennae shifted slightly. Another projection appeared, images of Earth. Storms raging across oceans, mountains piercing the clouds, humans climbing cliffs, diving into deep oceans, building cities beneath impossible conditions. They did not simply survive their world, Thryn said. He paused. The amphitheater remained silent.
Because now the lesson was clear. The human's question had not only disproven a scientific theory, it had shattered an entire philosophy of survival. Thryn looked across the rows of young scholars. humanity's greatest strength is not gravity resistance, not endurance. He allowed the words to settle. He turned once more toward the holographic image of Earth slowly rotating above the chamber. Beyond the Academy walls, the galaxy continued to change. New research stations had begun studying extreme environments. Explorers had started visiting worlds once considered too dangerous to approach. And in distant star systems, human ships continued to travel farther than anyone expected, always searching, always asking questions, dangerous questions, questions that challenged physics, questions that challenged biology, questions that challenged the assumptions of entire civilizations. Thryn looked back at the students one final time. "Remember this," he said. He paused. "But if there is one lesson humanity has given us," his voice softened slightly. "Far beyond the Academy, among the endless stars, humanity continued its journey. And somewhere out there, another human was almost certainly asking a new question, a question just as dangerous, a question that might once again force the galaxy to rewrite the limits of what life could become."